Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to continue our lecture series on the Civil War. The last lecture we left off with the victories for the North in Shiloh and New Orleans and then Antietam. Lincoln has wanted to issue the Emancipation Proclamation for a while now, which would free the slaves from the states that are in rebellion and but didn't want to issue it from a position of weakness because it would look desperate, and he's afraid that Europe might believe that his issuance of the Proclamation was because he's desperate and didn't think he could win, which might have ramifications where Europe might end up supporting the South, or the northern domestic population might believe it was desperate and might stop supporting the war. So, with the victory at Antietam, he's going to be able to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, Lincoln, in conversations with Horace Greeley, which is one of the most famous journalists of the time, you go west, young man, go west. It kind of explains his rationale, and he says the quote's right there. My paramount object in the struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all of the slaves, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. Essentially, what he's saying is, look, before the war started, I opposed the expansion of slavery in the territories. I'm hoping that slavery will eventually die out in the South. But once you started this war and left the Union, before I can deal with the slavery issue, I have to win this war. And I'm going to do what I have to do to win this war. And then, maybe I'll do something with slavery later. Definitely he's going to stop the expansion of it into the territories. And it goes to show that Lincoln is a pragmatist. He deals in reality. And he knows that he believes slavery is evil. We know that he believes slavery is evil. Some people take this quote and they say, "Oh, Lincoln didn't care about ending slavery." No, he did. He just knew that it's not that simple. Just because you want to end slavery doesn't mean you can just go out there and do it. There's ramifications, and so there's reasons why he puts the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation off, and there's reasons why he only frees some slaves and not others, because he still needs the support of the border states that are the Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, that didn't leave the Union. If he frees all the slaves, they'll leave, and maybe he loses the war, and then slavery is forever allowed to be in the South. There's all kinds of ramifications here, and so he's got to maneuver this very dangerous political landscape, and so. He will get together with his cabinet, William Seward being one of them, William Seward right there. And he's essentially going to, say that I've made up my mind. I'm going to do this. And so why the delay? Well, Lincoln didn't want to lose the border states, and that's also a reason why he doesn't free all the slaves. That won't happen until the 13th Amendment, which is going to happen after the Civil War. So he doesn't want to lose the border states. He feared that there's, not all Northern whites. Remember, we talked about this before, the idea that these monolithic groups, all Northerners are opposed to racism and all Southerners support racism. That's just not true, right? As a matter of fact, there's lots of whites up north that are pro-slavery, or even if they're not pro-slavery, they might be against slavery and still be racist and think that they shouldn't be enslaved, but they're not our equals and we shouldn't fight and die for them. And so he's afraid that there be some racist whites that would stop fighting. And he's got his own doubts about whether or not society is ready for whites and blacks to get along. And so, and there's always tension between groups. And clearly, we're living in a society in our modern times where there's still struggles there. But Lincoln, ultimately, although he has those concerns, is hopeful that we're all going to be able to get along. And the trend is a good one. is what I should say. Well, we are becoming every day, we are becoming a more and more tolerant society. And so, but Lincoln at the time has his doubts. So, what did the Emancipation Proclamation actually do? Well, it freed slaves in all states that were rebelling against the Union. So, in fact, it actually didn't do anything. The states that are rebelling, it's not like they just turned over their slaves. Mississippi's like, no, you're not my president anymore. I left the Union. I'm not turning over my slaves. Now, to say it did nothing, that's hyperbole. There's exaggeration there, because it is going to give slaves in the South hope, that potentially they can run away and escape to the North and forever be free. It also, anytime the Union Army comes in, you'll see a flood of slaves kind of like escaping to the Union, and every time that one of those slaves escapes to the Union Army, that's one less worker the South is going to have. So it didn't really free. It didn't really free a whole lot of slaves initially, but then as the Union forces move through, they're going to be freeing slaves along the way, which is in fact taking resources from the South. More importantly, what it does is it makes this war about slavery. Right? The South is saying to the European nations, "Oh, it's not about slavery; it's about tariffs, and it's about northern instigators, and it's about our freedom as states." And they're making that argument to Europe, hoping that Europe will back them. Well, now that the North has said, "No, it's about slavery, and we're going to end it," right? All of a sudden now European politicians, there's massive amount of pressure from the people of Europe to say we're not going to back a pro-slavery country over a anti-slavery country, and so it's going to keep Europe out of successfully keep Europe out of the fight, and that means that the North is bound to win a war of attrition if Europe stays out. So. Right. It's impossible to enforce, but it keeps Europe out of the fight, which is a huge win. So, why'd Lincoln bother? Politically, kept England and France from helping the South because he freed the freed the slaves from the states in rebellion. It's going to not be as dangerous for the border states, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, right? And it's going to give the moral superiority to the North. Now, how was it received? Well, in the North, no one was really happy about it. I mean, people kind of knew that we were fighting over this anyway. Racist whites are going to believe, like, there are some racist whites that are fighting because they believe the Union should be held together because it's going to maintain American power. They're going to be upset that they feel like, oh, what now? I'm fighting for some black person in the South that I've never met. But most are ambivalent to it in the North, meaning they just duh, of course we're fighting over slavery. In the South, they're going to use it to rally any stragglers. Look, our way of life is going to be destroyed by the North if they win. So it's really, as far as it's received, it's really predictable how both sides receive it. Now, Lincoln is he's in a situation now. The war's not going exactly the way that he wants it to go. It's becoming a war of attrition, which means he needs more soldiers, and he's running out of volunteers. And so Congress will pass the Conscription Act in 1863, which is supposed to be able to draft all men between the ages of 20, 40, and 45. And so what that just means is to draft a soldier, it's everybody's supposed to put their names. Today it's like a random drawing of people between 20 and 45. So just because you sign up for the draft doesn't mean you actually get drafted. Well, today we've tried to institute a draft in a way that's really kind of fair, because what we see is the Conscription Act of 1863 is not fair. What will happen is, many Northerners are going to be very upset about this because the rich are going to be able to buy their way out of it. For about $300, you could buy a replacement and buy your way out of service. And so the rich are just going to buy their way out, which means that the brunt of the conscription is going to land on the poor, and particularly the Irish. The Irish are, they're fleeing Ireland because, there's just economic devastation there. And, they're a vulnerable population, doesn't have a lot of money. They're being promised citizenship if they fight for this war, and it's there's going to be some strong resentment that the draft is placing such a burden on the poor, and because of that, we're going to see New York draft riots, and in these riots, over 100 people are going to be killed. Cities are going to be burnt. In particular, New York is going to be burnt. Because essentially people are frustrated that the rich are going to be able to buy their way out of this, and they're right, and ultimately we're going to have to change the way our draft works. We're still going to have complaints about the draft in the 1960s with the Vietnam War, and we'll talk about those in future lectures. So the fact that Lincoln is having to deal with draft riots in the North, there's also going to be complaints that he's going to take the powers of the presidency too far. And so even though he's got some of these victories that are starting to happen for the North, there's a ton of political pressure on him because there's not as many victories as people would like. It still seems like the South is winning, and they in fact really are. People don't like the draft. People are ambivalent about the Emancipation Proclamation. And one of the bigger criticisms, and this is one that is seriously legitimate, is he's going to suspend the right of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is a Latin term. It means produce the body. And it's one of the due process rights that all of us as citizens have. Essentially, if we get arrested, habeas corpus means that the government has an obligation to tell you why you were arrested. They have to bring charges, and they have to put you on trial, and they have to tell the public essentially where you're at so you can't disappear. Well, Lincoln suspends the writ of habeas corpus. You cannot do that. You can't do it. The Constitution specifically says you cannot suspend the right of habeas corpus, writ of habeas corpus. And so, but Lincoln essentially does it anyway, and he starts to throw anybody that's criticizing the war effort, in jail. It doesn't tell them why, and just keeps them there. That severely curtails due process. It is taking away people's constitutional rights. And Lincoln is just okay with it because he thinks, the Union won't survive and your rights won't matter if this war doesn't get won. I don't know that he's wrong, but I also completely believe that it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we have our rights, and those rights are sacrosanct, and we just got to figure out another way. And so, this is kind of one of those things that I think we can really legitimately criticize Lincoln for. We don't want to establish the fact that presidents have the right to do things like this, because if one president tries it, then a future president is going to try it, and then it just gets easier and easier to take away our rights, and that just can't stand. So, shame on you, Lincoln. So because there is all of this kind of criticism of Lincoln, and he's got some domestic issues, we're going to see the rise of the Copperheads. And so the Copperheads are peace Democrats from the North. They are actually advocating for peace with the South. They're saying, let the South be their own country. It's not worth all these Northern lives. It's not worth it. And so the Democratic Party in the North will have a significant faction of it that is going to say, let the South keep slavery. That's fine. That's their problem, and we should have peace. Well, Lincoln can't really have that, and so this guy right here, Clement Vallandigham, who is kind of the leader of this movement, he's going to get caught up in accusations of helping the South, and the South really is supportive of this movement. They want to see the Democrats in the North do well in the election, because that just means the political support to fight the war will be less. And so eventually, Lenningham is going to be banished to the South, and he's going to have to head down south because Lincoln just won't have it. So it shows that Lincoln is under quite a bit of political pressure. Okay, that's where we're going to leave off with the lecture today. Thank you very much for your time, and I will see you again shortly.